This is INS Varsha, India's new $3.7 billion underground nuclear submarine base. Built into a rocky cliff, it is designed to survive a nuclear attack, while its underwater tunnels would allow submarines to dock in secret. The base is built to house India's growing fleet of nuclear submarines, with space for up to 12 of them. These nuclear submarines will complete one of India's 3 nuclear deterrence platforms in the near future, and INS Varsha will keep part of the Triad away from prying eyes, including satellite intelligence. India has commissioned more than a dozen new submarines, including 5 nuclear ballistic missile capable, which will play a critical role in deterring China. But India isn't there yet. Currently, it has 2 such submarines, while China has 12. Even so, this isn't a game of numbers, but rather one of reach. Operating close to home gives India the advantage. Many of its diesel-electric submarines are within the operational range of Chinese nuclear submarines. In these types of high-risk standoffs, victory often hinges on the first strike. INS Varsha, with its sheltered location, would give India a second move in case of conflict. And so the base not only forms the backbone of India's strategy to keep China in check, but also amounts to a multi-billion-dollar commitment to a stronger naval posture in the Indian Ocean. Admittedly, New Delhi's path to naval preeminence will not be an easy one, but with tensions mounting with China, it is a necessary one. Some of our content takes longer to produce than others. Odoo, the sponsor of today's video, helps me keep track of all the work behind the scenes. Odoo is an all-in-one management software that provides a range of applications to simplify the day-to-day operations of any business. The first application is free for life with unlimited hosting and support, and if you want to use 2 apps or more, you can switch to the paid plan. Making videos requires a lot of work. So, I use Odoo's project app to manage everything more efficiently. Here's how it works. For this video, I created a project where my team can track each phase in production, such as research, writing, animations, video editing, and more. I've added deadlines to each task, and I can select from several different views to find the one that helps me stay organized. Personally, I use the Kanban board by default. But there's also the calendar view, which gives a clear visual overview of all our deadlines, and there's also the Gantt view, which visualizes dependencies on a timeline. Click the link in the description or the pinned comment to try out your first application completely for free. The Bay of Bengal is the world's largest coastal body of water. But with the rapid rise of China and India, it is also becoming the most strategic. Many of the world's busiest maritime highways pass through it, and the bay itself is home to immense natural resources. About 7% of the global catch is found here. That's enough protein for nearly 400 million people annually. Meanwhile, below the seabed sit significant reserves of both natural gas and crude oil. More famously, however, the bay is home to the most strategic naval choke point, the Malacca Strait. Around 94,000 ships pass through it every year, carrying around 30% of all traded goods globally. The strait is also the biggest oil transport route in the world, with 23.7 million barrels of crude oil passing through it every day to power East Asia's factories and industries. What's more, the oil and gas that pass through the strait make up 80% of all the energy China imports, which makes Malacca the jugular of the Chinese economy. This vulnerability is not lost on Beijing. In fact, as a backup plan, it is working to set up other supply routes. 3 corridors in particular stand out. Stretching from Yunnan province is the China-Myanmar Economic Corridor. It consists of pipelines, railways, and roads and connects China's regional hub, Kunming, to the $7.3 billion Kyaukphyu deep seaport in Myanmar. On the other end of South Asia is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a 3,000-kilometer network of infrastructure projects that connect the Xinjiang region with the ports in Karachi and Gwadar by the Arabian Sea. Also anchoring in Xinjiang is the Middle Corridor. This one goes from the commercial hubs in Urumqi and Kashgar to Central Asia, across the Caspian Sea, and then into Turkey to link with the European Union. These three corridors, as ambitious as they are, still do not come close to the capacity of the Malacca Strait, and so China has spent the last 2 decades modernizing its navy. Today, Beijing possesses a fleet that is both larger and arguably more modern than the United States. In 2023, the US Department of Defense reported that China had over 370 battle force ships. That's about 78 more than the United States. On the flip side, 96 of China's warships are coastal defense ships such as frigates or corvettes. So America might have fewer ships, but they're bigger and can carry more firepower. However, this is set to change. In pursuit of greater strategic depth, China is shifting production to larger surface vessels such as Type 055 destroyer, Type 092 nuclear submarine, and a trio of aircraft carriers, the hallmarks of any blue water navy. These classes of heavier ships will bring greater power projection, offsetting China's vulnerability in the Malacca Strait. But there is a problem. Blue water navies require broader logistical support, and so in the past decade, Beijing has been forging new diplomatic ties and setting up basing rights for its navy beyond the East and South China Seas. Up to this point, Beijing has spent nearly $30 billion in aid across 46 countries, and that soft power policy is working. In 2017, China opened its first overseas base in Djibouti, and now similar agreements are in the works with Cambodia, Pakistan, Tanzania, and others. Most striking, however, is the buildup of Chinese forces in the Bay of Bengal. The Kiaopiu deep seaport in Myanmar and the BNS Pekua naval base in Bangladesh are both built to be operated by the host countries. But in recent years, the PLA Navy has used them the most, which plays into a strategy called continual presence. You see, by establishing logistical hubs throughout the region and operating these year-round, China's activity in the Indian Ocean becomes normalized in the eyes of the locals, which boosts its credibility. Continual presence also closes the distance between Beijing and its potential security partners while increasing the confidence of local allies. Ergo, in establishing itself beyond the Pacific, China sets itself up as a global power and forces regional actors to reconsider their moves. However, whereas China's maneuvers are welcomed by nations such as the Maldives, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, India scorns them. Home to 7,500 kilometers of coastline and over 1,000 island territories, India holds massive maritime potential. However, security threats from its neighbors have stopped New Delhi from tapping into its sea power. Despite being heavily reliant on shipping for up to 97% of its external trade, India has what is called a continental obsession. Land and air capabilities have repeatedly been prioritized at the expense of the Navy, which is allocated less than 15% of the military budget each year. The results speak for themselves. India possesses only 130 warships, which is an almost 3-to-1 disadvantage compared to China. Moreover, most of the warships it has are outdated, worn out, and no longer fit for purpose, at least when measured by NATO standards. The Navy's 15% cut, which amounts to a little over $11 billion, is enough to service its existing fleet, but falls short of the amount required for the construction of an additional 200 warships by 2035, something that the federal government aspires to. Faced with such limitations, India is now shifting to a strategy of sea denial. The keystone of this is the INS Varsha, a 20 square kilometer submarine base on the mountainous rim of the Bay of Bengal, situated roughly in the middle of India's eastern coastline. While work on INS Varsha began in 2005 to decongest the existing naval port of Vizag, China's Continual presence has expedited the process. INS Varsha is now due for completion in 2026. Once completed, it will accommodate the bulk of India's growing nuclear-powered submarine fleet. It will be India's answer to China's Yulin naval base on Hainan Island. For decades, India's submarine fleet mainly consisted of diesel-electric Sindhu-Ghosh-class attack submarines. However, with the launch of the INS Arihant in 2016, New Delhi achieved a breakthrough in naval modernization. At just over 100 meters in length and costing $470 million per unit, the Arihant class is India's first indigenously developed nuclear ballistic missile submarine. Only a handful of nations are capable of domestically building such vessels, and India is now one of them. INS Arihant is the result of 4 decades of research, dating back to the 1970s when India sought mobile nuclear deterrence against Pakistan. The Arihant class is equipped with 4 vertical launch tubes and can carry 12 ballistic missiles with a range of about 700 kilometers, or 4 Kalam-4 nuclear-capable ballistic missiles that can travel 3,500 kilometers. In 2024, the Kalam-4 made headlines following its launch from the INS Arigat, the second of India's Arihant-class submarines. With a range of 3,500 kilometers, the Kalam-4 is able to target Chinese military installations as far away as Hainan. And, with the Arihant class quieter than its competitors, the threat posed by India's new fleet will weigh on the minds of Chinese policymakers. It hasn't been all smooth sailing, however. In 2017, a serious incident occurred when a crew member of the INS Arihant neglected to secure a hatch properly on the aft of the boat. The consequent flooding of the vessel's propulsion system forced the submarine into dry dock for 10 months, with engineers working around the clock to replace the damaged parts. Despite such mishaps, 2 more Arihant-class submarines are expected to be commissioned this year. By 2035, India's fleet at INS Varsha is projected to expand by another 3 state-of-the-art S-5 class nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines and 6 Project 77 class nuclear-powered attack submarines. That's quite an extensive catalog. And in service of it, INS Varsha will be equipped with a command center as well as direct access to the Baba Atomic Research Center located just 16 kilometers away in Achyutapuram. India established its nuclear triad in 2018, but as the nuclear submarine fleet grows in number and sophistication, the triad will mature. In time, it will give India greater strategic deterrence, survivability, and second strike capability, which will deter large-scale conflicts. Though impressive, India's commitment to stronger naval posturing also goes beyond Varsha, beyond its mainland shores, in fact. 1,200 kilometers southeast lie the Andaman and Nicobar Islands, an archipelago of over 500 small islets, 37 of which are inhabited. Located just under 300 kilometers south of Myanmar, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands form a defensive barrier separating maritime Southeast Asia from the Bay of Bengal. Together, the islands have an attached 663,000 square kilometer exclusive economic zone, which accounts for 30% of India's total EEZ. Moreover, the islands are rich in natural resources, including crude oil and natural gas. But it's really the location that makes these islands strategically indispensable. Located roughly 500 to 600 kilometers from the Malacca Strait, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands serve as forward operating bases for the Indian Navy. And with advanced surveillance systems on the ground, India can effectively track Chinese vessels moving through the region. But that's not all. Until recently, the islands were equipped with two dual-function airports, the Veer Savarkar International Airport at Port Blair and the Car Nicobar Air Force Station. Now, a third runway at Shibpur, known as the INS Kohasa, has been constructed. Measuring a kilometer in length, the new runway is equipped with night landing facilities as well as sufficient width and depth to support larger aircraft such as the Boeing P-8 Poseidon submarine hunter, of which India has a dozen. In all, the Andaman and Nicobar Islands tilt the scales back in India's favor, but now New Delhi is taking it a step further. Just as China moves into India's backyard, India is starting to do the same in China's backyard. Under Prime Minister Modi's policy dubbed Act East, India has been reaching out to Southeast Asia not for polite conversation but for arms deals. In April 2024, India delivered the first batch of BrahMos supersonic cruise missiles to the Philippines, and a similar arms deal is in the works with Vietnam. For reference, BrahMos is one of the fastest cruise missiles in the world. It has pinpoint accuracy and can be launched from land, air, and sea. Taken together, by projecting into the South China Sea and building an undersea fortress, India looks to disperse China's resources and corner it in the Bay of Bengal. By all means, control is not always inherited, but always contested, one sea at a time. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. If you approve of what we do, please leave a comment, hit the like button, and mayhaps share the video. In any case, thank you for your time, and Sawal.